Hello and a very warm welcome to my channel Coins Worth Million each and every one of you tuning in today. We are absolutely delighted to have you here, and I want to take this very special moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to all our new viewers, our loyal subscribers, and everyone who is joining this journey with us right now. This video is not just a simple start, it is the beginning of a meaningful connection between you and this channel. So let's get it started. The 1964 United States 5-cent coin, more commonly known as the Jefferson Nickel, holds an especially important place in American numismatic history because it represents not just a coin struck in huge numbers but also one deeply connected to the mid-20th century transition in U.S. coinage. The coin itself is part of the Jefferson Nickel series, which began in 1938 and replaced the Buffalo nickel. By 1964, the Jefferson design had already been circulating for over 25 years, yet the year's coinage carried a special significance. It was the last U.S. 5-cent piece to bear a mintmark on the reverse until 1968, and it was produced in record-breaking quantities due to a nationwide coin shortage. Collectors and historians often look at the 1964 nickel as both an ordinary circulating coin and an emblem of a turbulent moment in U.S. coinage policy. To begin, one must understand the design origins. The Jefferson Nickel was designed by Felix Schlag, a German-born American sculptor, who won the competition held by the U.S. Mint in 1938. His design featured a left-facing portrait of President Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, based loosely on an 1800 bust by French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdin. On the reverse, Schlag originally proposed a more artistic composition, but the mint required him to modify it to showcase Jefferson's Virginia home, Monticello. The version adopted in 1938 remained largely unchanged through 1964, with Jefferson's bust framed by the words, "In God We Trust," on the left and "Liberty," followed by the year on the right. On the reverse, Monticello stood in the center, with the word, Monticello, below, 5 cents, beneath that, and United States of America, along the lower rim, all encircled by E pluribus unum, at the top. By the time the 1964 issue was struck, the Jefferson design had become thoroughly familiar to Americans of all walks of life. The composition of the 1964 nickel is standard for the series at that time, 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving the coin its characteristic silver-gray appearance. Unlike dimes, quarters, and half dollars of 1964, which were struck in 90% silver and soon saw dramatic changes with the Coinage Act of 1965, the nickel's metallic content did not undergo a shift. Each coin weighed 5 grams and measured 21.2 millimeters in diameter, with a plain edge. Because the nickel was not a precious metal coin, it was not hoarded in the same way as silver coins during the coin shortage, but the massive demand for small change in the early 1960s ensured its mintage reached unprecedented levels. The 1964 Jefferson Nickel was minted at both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, and the combined output was staggering. More than 2.8 billion nickels were struck that year, which at the time represented the largest single-year production of any U.S. coin in history. Specifically, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 1 billion nickels with no mintmark, while the Denver Mint produced over 1.7 billion with a small d to the right of Monticello on the reverse. There are also proofs struck at Philadelphia, intended for collectors, numbering over 3.9 million pieces, which was a record high for proofs as well. This massive production run was a direct response to the coin shortage of 1964, when the U.S. Mint was under pressure from the Treasury and Congress to flood the economy with coinage to keep commerce flowing. A unique historical aspect of the 1964 nickel lies in the Mint's decision to continue striking coins dated 1964 well into 1965. This was an unusual move and was authorized in an attempt to discourage hoarding. At the time, collectors and speculators were setting aside coins from each year in uncirculated condition, contributing to the shortage. To combat this, the Mint froze the date at 1964, minting them into the following year without updating the design. As a result, The 1964 nickel is not just common, it is extraordinarily common, with billions surviving in circulation and in bank vaults for years afterward. This fact also makes the 1964 nickel one of the least rare U.S. coins of the 20th century in circulated condition, though certain varieties and well-preserved examples remain desirable to collectors. Speaking of varieties, specialists in the Jefferson series often note that the 1964 and 1964D nickels come with numerous die varieties and minor differences due to the sheer volume of dies required to strike billions of coins. Some of the most notable include repunched mintmarks (RPMs), doubled dies on both obverse and reverse, and overused or deteriorated dies that produced weak strikes. Because the Denver Mint in particular produced so many nickels, collectors frequently encounter 1964D repunched D varieties, in which the mintmark appears doubled. While none of these varieties are extremely rare compared to errors in other series, they provide interesting subfields for variety collectors. Additionally, high-grade examples with full steps on Monticello, meaning the design's steps are fully struck and visible without wear, can command substantial premiums, especially from the Denver Mint issue, which was notoriously poorly struck. In terms of circulation, the 1964 nickel was a workhorse coin, passing through countless hands in everyday commerce. It was used to buy candy bars, ride buses, pay for newspapers, and serve as change in nearly every small transaction of the mid-1960s. Unlike silver dimes and quarters, which were rapidly disappearing from circulation after 1965 due to their bullion value, nickels remained widely available. This further reinforced their role as a staple of pocket change. For ordinary Americans, the 1964 nickel was not remarkable, it was simply a part of daily life. Yet for numismatists looking back, the year represents a high point in production and a low point in artistry, as the sheer scale of minting often meant lower quality strikes and less attention to detail. The proof 1964 nickels, however, tell a different story. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint for inclusion in proof sets, these coins were carefully made with mirrored fields and sharp details. Though not rare due to their high mintage, they are prized for their beauty and can be found in varying degrees of cameo contrast. Cameo and deep cameo proofs, which display frosted designs against reflective backgrounds, are considerably scarcer and more valuable. Collectors seeking quality examples of 1964 proof nickels must pay attention to surface preservation, as many have haze, spotting, or hairlines from handling over the decades. Another aspect worth noting is the broader historical context of 1964. The United States was entering a turbulent era with the civil rights movement, the escalation of the Vietnam War, and the presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson. The coinage shortage became a symbol of broader anxieties, as people hoarded coins either out of habit or fear of future scarcity. In this atmosphere, the Mint's decision to date freeze coins and massively increase output was both an economic necessity and a reflection of government control over monetary supply. The nickel, being a base metal coin, was perhaps the least affected by bullion concerns, yet it still carried the mark of this era in its immense mintage. In the collecting world today, the 1964 Jefferson Nickel is ubiquitous in circulated grades and can be found in rolls and bags at minimal cost. However, the challenge lies in finding exceptional specimens. Mint state examples with sharp details, clean surfaces, and full steps are scarce relative to the total population. For example, a 1964D nickel with full steps graded MS66 or higher by a major grading service can command hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction, despite the overall commonness of the issue. This paradox, billions minted, but few struck with perfection, gives the coin its numismatic intrigue. Furthermore, the varieties like doubled dies and RPMs add layers of collectability. Culturally, the 1964 nickel connects generations. Older Americans recall using them in the 1960s, while collectors today often encounter them in pocket change, teaching beginners that not all old coins are valuable but all have stories to tell. For young numismatists, the 1964 nickel is frequently one of the first, old, coins they find, sparking interest in history and collecting. It also serves as a reminder that coins are both utilitarian and symbolic. Every nickel carries Jefferson's image and Monticello's facade, quietly reinforcing American heritage and values. In conclusion, the 1964 United States 5-cent piece is more than just another coin in the long-running Jefferson series. It represents a turning point in coinage history during the coin shortage crisis, stands as the most heavily produced nickel of its time, and remains an accessible yet nuanced collectible. Its design ties back to Jefferson and Monticello, its production reflects mid-century economic challenges, and its varieties offer collectors endless avenues for study. While it may be common in numbers, it is rich in context, making it a fascinating subject for anyone who wishes to understand the deeper story behind what might seem like an ordinary coin. Next coin. The 1963 United States 5-cent coin, universally recognized as part of the Jefferson Nickel series, is an intriguing piece of mid-20th century American coinage history. While at first glance it might appear to be just another common coin, when examined more closely it reveals a story shaped by design heritage, national economics, minting practices, and numismatic traditions. The Jefferson nickel itself dates back to 1938, when the U.S. Mint replaced the beloved but technically difficult Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring President Thomas Jefferson and his Virginia home, Monticello. By 1963, the design was in its 25th year of circulation, familiar to every American, and deeply woven into the rhythm of everyday commerce. The 1963 issue preceded one of the most dramatic moments in American coinage history, the coin shortage of 1964 and the subsequent removal of silver from dimes, quarters, and half dollars. As such, the 1963 nickel sits on the threshold of change, representing the last of the quiet years before the coinage crisis exploded into the public spotlight. The obverse of the 1963 Jefferson nickel features a portrait of Thomas Jefferson facing left, designed by Felix Schlag. Schlag's winning design, chosen in 1938, had to undergo modifications at the Mint's request, but the final version had become iconic by the early 1960s. Jefferson's bust is rendered with dignified simplicity, his gaze forward, symbolizing rational leadership and Enlightenment ideals. Around him are inscriptions: "In God We Trust," on the left along the rim, "Liberty," to the right followed by the date, 1963, separated by a small star. The reverse depicts Monticello, Jefferson's neoclassical estate, drawn in a straightforward, architectural style, framed by the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, above, the word, Monticello, directly beneath the building, and the denomination, 5 cents, followed by, United States of America, curving along the rim below. The design conveys continuity, stability, and a sense of national identity, which was especially fitting during a period of Cold War uncertainty when American coinage still leaned heavily on familiar, reassuring imagery. In terms of physical composition, the 1963 nickel was struck in the traditional alloy used since 1946, 75% copper and 25% nickel. This copper-nickel combination gave the coin its silvery appearance, durability, and resistance to corrosion, distinguishing it from silver coins but also giving it a distinct weight and feel. The coin weighed 5 grams, measured 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and featured a plain edge. Unlike silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars of the same era, the nickel did not face a bullion crisis, since its intrinsic metal value was much lower than its face value. This would later prove important during the coin shortages of the mid-1960s, as the nickel remained one of the most stable circulating denominations unaffected by silver hoarding. The 1963 Jefferson nickel was struck at 2 facilities, the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint. The Philadelphia Mint coins bear no mintmark, while the Denver issues feature a small D to the right of Monticello on the reverse. In total, more than 456 million nickels were produced in Philadelphia and over 276 million at Denver, making the combined mintage well over 732 million pieces. This was a substantial mintage by any standard, reflecting the growing demand for coinage in an expanding economy. The United States in 1963 was experiencing a consumer boom, with vending machines, parking meters, and small-scale purchases increasingly relying on coinage. Nickels, in particular, were central to everyday transactions, whether buying a bottle of soda, a candy bar, or a bus ticket. The production numbers underscore the mint's role in supplying a rapidly modernizing consumer society. The proof coinage of 1963 is also noteworthy. Struck in Philadelphia, proof nickels of that year were specially made for collectors, with highly polished dies and planchettes creating coins with mirror-like fields and sharp, frosted details. Over 3.1 million proof sets were produced in 1963, a number that represented growing interest in coin collecting during the post-war period. These proofs often display exceptional quality, but many examples suffer from haze or cloudy toning due to improper storage in their original packaging. Deep cameo examples, those with strongly frosted devices contrasting against mirrored fields, are particularly rare and sought after, commanding significant premiums in the numismatic marketplace. When it comes to strike quality, the 1963 Jefferson Nickel exhibits many of the challenges typical of the series. The design, while handsome, was notoriously difficult to bring up fully on the dies, particularly the fine detail of Monticello's steps on the reverse. As a result, many circulation strike 1963 nickels show weaker incomplete steps, leading collectors today to place special value on full steps, FS examples where the lines of Monticello's staircase are sharply defined and uninterrupted. Full steps nickels are much scarcer than ordinary strikes, and for the 1963 and 1963D issues, high-grade full steps pieces can be quite valuable, often reaching hundreds or even thousands of dollars at top grades certified by professional grading services. In terms of varieties, the 1963 nickel does not present any famous or dramatic errors like doubled dies known in other years, but the massive production and large number of dies required do give rise to minor anomalies. Collectors can find repunched mintmarks (RPMs) on the Denver issues, as well as small die cracks, die clashes, and variations in strike sharpness. These anomalies provide a fertile hunting ground for specialists who enjoy die variety studies. Even though the 1963 nickel may not hold legendary rarities, its subtler varieties reward close attention and patience, reflecting the meticulous nature of advanced numismatic study. Historically, the year 1963 was significant for the United States in ways far beyond coinage. It was the year of Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington, the height of the civil rights movement, and tragically, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas, in November. Against this backdrop, coins such as the 1963 Jefferson Nickel may seem mundane, yet they were part of the everyday fabric of life for millions of Americans navigating these turbulent times. A 1963 nickel could have been in the pocket of a civil rights marcher, a college student in the Peace Corps, or a commuter reading about the space race. The coin thus carries with it an unspoken link to a pivotal era in U.S. history. From the standpoint of circulation, the 1963 nickel was a workhorse coin. Unlike silver coins, which began to be hoarded in anticipation of rising bullion values, nickels continued to circulate freely without interruption. Children saved them in piggy banks, soda machines accepted them by the millions, and they were a common component of change returned at stores. The durability of the nickel alloy meant that many 1963 coins survived decades of circulation, and even today they can occasionally be found in pocket change, though often worn smooth. Their survival in such large numbers ensures that circulated examples hold little premium above face value. In the numismatic marketplace today, the 1963 nickel holds interest primarily at the high end of the grading scale. Mint state coins with strong luster and sharp details are desirable, particularly from Denver, where strike quality was often poorer. Full steps coins are the ultimate prize, with MS-65FS and higher examples bringing strong premiums. Proof 1963 nickels also remain popular, with cameo and deep cameo examples being especially scarce. Collectors assembling Jefferson Nickel sets often face the challenge of locating a fully struck, high-grade 1963, which adds excitement to what might otherwise seem like a common date. The cultural significance of the Jefferson Nickel, including the 1963 issue, should not be underestimated. It stands as one of the longest-running designs in U.S. coinage history, having been in place since 1938 and not replaced until 2004. By 1963, the Jefferson Nickel had become a symbol of continuity, a coin design that generations of Americans had grown up with. For many, the image of Jefferson in Monticello was as recognizable as the Lincoln cent or the Washington quarter. Coins like the 1963 nickel were therefore not just tools of commerce but also quiet carriers of national identity, reinforcing ideals of leadership, liberty, and architectural heritage. In conclusion, the 1963 United States 5-cent piece is a coin of fascinating depth once examined closely. It represents the calm before the storm of the mid-1960s coinage crisis, embodies the technical challenges of the Jefferson Nickel series, and carries historical resonance from a transformative year in American society. While common in numbers, it offers layers of interest through its strike quality, proof issues, minor varieties, and cultural symbolism. For casual collectors, it may be just another old nickel, but for numismatists, it is a piece of the larger mosaic of American coinage, one that deserves attention, study, and appreciation as a link between the stable 1950s and the turbulent mid-1960s. The 1963 Jefferson Nickel thus endures not merely as currency but as a witness to history, a token of commerce, and a canvas of artistry in metal. Next coin. The 1979 United States 5-cent coin, known universally as the Jefferson Nickel, is an emblem of continuity within American coinage, a coin that by the late 1970s had already been circulating in essentially the same form for over 4 decades. When people today pick up a 1979 nickel, they often view it as ordinary pocket change, but when numismatists examine it, they see the end result of decades of mint practices, the continuation of Felix Schlag's design legacy, and the story of American economic life in an era of inflation, technological change, and shifting cultural currents. The 1979 nickel sits at an interesting moment in numismatic history, after the 1964 coinage crisis and the date freeze experiment, but before the great redesigns of the early 21st century. Thus, it represents the long, steady middle period of the Jefferson Nickel series, when it had become a familiar presence in every cash drawer, vending machine, and pocket across the United States. On its obverse, the 1979 nickel displays the well-known left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States and the author of the Declaration of Independence. Designed in 1938 by Felix Schlag, the portrait was originally based loosely on the 1789 bust of Jefferson by French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdin. By 1979, however, Schlag's design had been slightly modified in earlier decades, sharpening Jefferson's profile and adjusting some of the lettering. The inscriptions, "In God We Trust," arc around the left, while "Liberty" and the date, 1979, appear on the right, separated by a small star. Jefferson's portrait conveys a sense of Enlightenment idealism and rational dignity, an image of calm leadership that the Mint had hoped to present when the design was first chosen in the late 1930s. By the late 1970s, this portrait had become so familiar that most Americans recognized it instantly, even without looking at the reverse. The reverse of the 1979 nickel features Monticello, Jefferson's neoclassical mansion in Charlottesville, Virginia. Schlag's rendering is straightforward and architectural, presenting the building front-on, with its central dome prominent. Above Monticello appears the motto, E pluribus unum, while beneath the building is the word, Monticello, itself, flanked by the denomination, 5 cents, and the legend, United States of America, curving below. To the right of Monticello is the mint mark, either D for the Denver Mint or absent entirely for the Philadelphia Mint. Proof version struck at the San Francisco Mint bear an S mint mark. This depiction of Monticello, while sometimes criticized by numismatic artists for its flatness and lack of depth, nevertheless conveyed stability, heritage, and Jefferson's architectural genius, and by 1979 it was an entrenched element of American coin design. Compositionally, the 1979 nickel was struck in the same copper-nickel alloy that had been used since 1946, 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded in homogeneous form, giving the coin its silvery gray color. The coin weighs 5.0 grams, measures 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge. Unlike silver coins, which lost their intrinsic value component after the Coinage Act of 1965, the nickel remained a stable base metal coin, its metallic content consistently worth less than its face value. This allowed it to circulate without the hoarding that had plagued silver denominations in earlier decades. From a minting perspective, the 1979 Jefferson Nickel was produced in very large numbers, reflecting the enormous demand for coinage in a high-inflation era when more cash was circulating than ever before. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 463 million nickels without mintmark, while the Denver Mint struck approximately 325 million nickels with the D mintmark. In addition, the San Francisco Mint issued around 3.6 million proof nickels for inclusion in proof sets, all bearing the S mintmark. In total, close to 800 million Jefferson Nickels were struck in 1979, making them abundant in circulation at the time and ensuring that they remain common today. The historical backdrop of 1979 gives the coin additional context. The United States was undergoing significant economic challenges, with double-digit inflation, the energy crisis, and volatile international events shaping daily life. Americans were still recovering from the turmoil of the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, and a shifting cultural landscape, while the Carter administration was struggling to stabilize the economy. In this environment, coinage played an everyday role. Vending machines, parking meters, telephones, and transit systems all relied heavily on nickels, dimes, and quarters. The nickel, though only worth 5 cents, was essential for exact change in countless transactions. It symbolized the small unit of economic life, modest in value but vast in usage. Collectors examining the 1979 nickel often focus on strike quality, which varied considerably between the Philadelphia and Denver issues. As with most Jefferson Nickels of the period, the steps of Monticello on the reverse are rarely fully struck. Coins with sharp, uninterrupted, full steps are significantly scarcer and highly prized in the numismatic marketplace. The Denver Mint issues in particular are notorious for weak strikes, though attractive high-grade examples exist. Philadelphia issues are somewhat more common in higher states of preservation, but even then, sharply struck full-step specimens are unusual. Professional grading services recognize full steps, designations, and registry set collectors often compete to secure the best-preserved 1979 nickels, driving up their value. Proof nickels from San Francisco in 1979 deserve separate mention. These were struck on specially prepared planchettes using polished dies, producing coins with mirror-like surfaces and sharp details. The San Francisco Mint was, at this time, using both Type 1 and Type 2 mintmarks for its S. The Type 1 inch S was a filled, less defined mintmark, while the Type 2 inches S was sharper and clearer. Collectors often differentiate these varieties, and Type 2 proofs tend to be more desirable. Additionally, cameo and deep cameo proofs, where the design devices appear frosted against deeply reflective fields, carry premiums, since they are less common. These proof nickels capture the artistry of the Jefferson design in a way that circulation strikes rarely do, making them attractive additions to collector sets. When it comes to varieties and errors, the 1979 nickel is not famous for dramatic double dies or overdates, but minor die varieties, die clashes, and repunched mintmarks are known, especially from the Denver Mint. Specialists in the Jefferson series often hunt for these subtle varieties, which provide insight into mint practices and die preparation in the late 1970s. Occasional off-center strikes, broad strikes, or other striking errors also exist and are collected by error enthusiasts. While the vast majority of 1979 nickels are common and unremarkable, these anomalies add depth to the study of the year's coinage. In circulation, the 1979 nickel was everywhere. Children received them as change for candy, commuters used them in bus fare boxes, and millions clinked together in cash registers across the nation. For ordinary Americans, it was not a collector's item but a small necessity of daily life. Yet decades later, for collectors, the coin carries nostalgia, a tangible link to a time when 5 cents still held real purchasing power. A 1979 nickel is not ancient by numismatic standards, but it already belongs to a different economic world, before the dominance of digital payments, when physical coins were the lifeblood of small transactions. Today, in the numismatic market, 1979 nickels in circulated condition hold little to no premium, as they remain plentiful. Their real value lies in mint state condition with sharp strikes, especially full steps designations. High-grade Denver Mint full steps nickels are scarce and can command substantial prices at auction, particularly in MS66FS or higher. Philadelphia full steps examples are somewhat more available but still challenging. Proof nickels, especially deep cameo type 2 inches S specimens, are also sought after. Thus, while the majority of 1979 nickels are worth only their face value, select examples embody numismatic rarity within abundance, demonstrating how quality can outweigh quantity in coin collecting. Culturally, the 1979 Jefferson Nickel reinforces the long legacy of Schlag's design. For over 4 decades, it had represented Jefferson and Monticello to the public, serving as a subtle reminder of American Enlightenment values, architecture, and continuity. Its endurance reflects both the conservatism of U.S. coinage design and the public's comfort with familiar imagery. At a time when the nation was facing uncertainty in politics and economics, the unchanged nickel was a reassuring constant, an object of everyday trust and reliability. In conclusion, the 1979 United States 5-cent piece is more than just a common coin. It is a marker of economic history, a continuation of a design tradition, a product of immense mint output, and a collectible with hidden nuances in strike, variety, and proof detail. While billions were produced, and countless still circulate, the study of the 1979 nickel reveals how even the most ordinary coin can embody layers of history, technology, and cultural meaning. For the numismatist willing to look deeper, the 1979 nickel is not just 5 cents, it is a story in metal, a piece of living history, and a humble witness to American life in the late 1970s. Please like and subscribe to my channel.